This is so important. Please make sure that your parents have their finances in order. If you are bringing your parent to Africa, or if they're traveling with you, this means that you need to establish a POA, a power of attorney. There's a medical one and there's a financial one. You need both. And every institution that has their money and or benefits needs to be in possession of this POA. Notarized POA. The issue that I ran into is that I had a notarized POA, medical and financial. However, they wanted me to fly back to the US to present it in hand. I could not email it. I could not fax it. They were not interested in scheduling a video call in this day and age. Welcome to BLAXIT to Africa. I'm Tadre Delora Moignet, a California native living my best life in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I hope that you are informed, entertained, and inspired to BLAXIT to Africa. Life updates. Y'all, life has been lifing me. I have not been lifing it. First item on the agenda, U.S. elections. Crazy. What was so interesting to me is how tuned in Kenyans were to the U.S. elections. All over the news. In my compound, I noticed that people didn't even start to go to work until after the elections were finalized. The results were finalized. So that was about 11 o'clock, latest our time, East Africa time, about 10:30 earliest. That's when people started to move. And then once I left the compound and I was moving about the commercial districts of Kilimani, which is my neighborhood, there was like this somber feeling over the entire neighborhood. I don't want to say city because I don't want to say the entire city because I don't really know what it was like outside of Kilimani, but there was definitely a somber mood. I had some Kenyan friends hit me up and they were like, are you watching this? Are you going to stay up to watch it? And absolutely not. I faxed in my ballots and I went to bed. And then when I woke up and I saw that Trump was leading, it was just like, all right now. I did feel a way about it. I even questioned rationally and intellectually, like, why do I feel a way about it? Ain't nothing new happening here. But nonetheless, I did feel a way about it, and I ended up going over to the Arboretum to just ground myself in nature and get some messages from my favorite tree. No, that sounds weird, but there's a favorite tree of mine over there. She's over 100 years old, and she's from Brazil, and she be dropping knowledge, and I'll be down to listen. At the end of the day, as human beings on this planet, you know who your God is. You know who you pray to. And if there's anything that we have learned from COVID, we have learned that we don't survive based on what our governments do or don't do. And as my girl Britt said, life goes on. And at the end of the day, your bills will be due at the top of the month. Keep it pushing. And so that's all I got to say about that. Another life update. Some of y'all know I'm plant-based. I am like 99% plant-based. I typically will eat whatever I want to eat, whatever's available when I travel. However, when I'm home, I'm basically plant-based, fruits and veggies. And I have been feeling so lethargic and tired and just not wanting to do nothing. And before, I was just chopping it up to, well, it's the end of the year or towards the end of the year. And I always feel like this towards the end of the year. But recently, it's just been a lot. So I think I'm not getting enough protein. And throughout my life, I've been borderline anemic. There was one time where I literally had to be rushed to the hospital and the doctors was looking at me like, are you dumb? Are you dumb? You almost died. So there might be a little bit of that there as well. So I've reached out to some people who are in the know, and they've suggested that I eat eggs and fish. I do not like eggs. It's the yolk that disgusts me. And the fish, I don't want to start back eating fish. So if anybody out there has some ideas for getting enough protein in a plant-based diet, please let me know. I think part of the issue for me is that I just don't eat enough. I don't consume enough food to get the amount of protein that I need, which leads me to think that I need to start taking supplements. So let me know what supplements you think I should start taking. Um, yeah, I basically will have like a smoothie or a bowl of fruit for breakfast, and then no lunch. If I do have a lunch, it'll be an early lunch, and then I won't have like dinner, or maybe it's a late lunch and I won't have dinner. And then like I'll snack on nuts, popcorn, seeds. That's basically it. I don't really have a huge appetite, and so that's one of the things that's concerning me about consuming enough protein, especially for someone that works out. Lately, I just been wanting to lay in the bed. Um, and yes, okay, y'all. I gotta put on my auntie hats. I'm putting on my auntie hat right now. You've been warned. My services, they cost. They are not free. If you want information about BLAXITing and you don't want to pay for that information, keep watching and listening to these episodes. When you reach out to me, be very intentional about your expectations. You asking me to come and break bread with you while you take notes as I drop BLAXITing gems, baby, that's a consultation, okay? If you hit me up and you say you just want to break bread, you want to meet me, you have finally BLAXITed over to Kenya, you're in Nairobi, I'm in Nairobi, you want to meet up with a familiar face, I'm open to it. And I say that with a grain of salt because I am introverted. I can turn it on. I can be charismatic and outgoing. However, at the end of the day, I'm introverted. And I know this because I have to prepare myself to go out. Not just in getting dressed, but the mindset of being around people, being around crowds, going out into traffic. So my consultations, $100 for a single person. If it's 2 or 1 to 3 of you, it's $150 because I'm dispensing this knowledge to more than one person. I have been coming to the continent, whether as a volunteer, a contract worker, a student, a tourist, someone who has been living here as a nomad, as a resident since the age of 18. 18. This is over 30 years of knowledge. If you want it for free, keep watching and listening to these episodes. Otherwise, don't waste my time. Now, let me explain to you how a consultation will go. There's a link in the description. You can click that link. I have started pinning my consultation link in the first comment. You can click there. Once you click that, you will go over to my Calendly account. When you press that button for the consultation, there will be a number of questions that I would like you to answer so that I can prepare for the consultation. Based on your answers, we will have an organic conversation about your needs, your expectations, etc. Then I will compile a spreadsheet complete with resources, contacts, real people that you can speak with that will help you BLAXIT, whether it's visa information, relocation information, whatever it is that you need. You will walk away with a spreadsheet of information. Then, after the consultation, I will contact you, whether via phone or email. It's up to you to check on you. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Now, some of you have contacted me after you've already arrived and the shit is at the fan and you need guidance. I'm happy to do it. But wouldn't you rather speak to somebody on the ground who's experienced before you land? As you're beginning to get your ducks in order, wouldn't you rather speak to somebody like me? It don't have to be me. It's quite a few people in this space offering consultations and relocation services. To be clear, I do not offer relocation services. I know me, I know my bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth to really dive deep into the microcosm of holding your hand through every single process. But there are quite a few people here that do offer that. To be clear, I offer a consultation and recently started offering interior design services. I'm at the point in my life where I'm only doing what is fun, what brings me joy. And interior design is work. However, I am good at it and it brings me joy. So if you want to hire someone with your relocation, real estate services, etc., and then link up with me to at least, at the very least, help you source items for your home in Kenya, I'm happy to do it. For those of you looking at my house and you like, that's too many colors, I got you. This space is especially for me, floor seating, hanging chairs, full of color. Probably one of the few times in my life that I've been able to decorate my house exactly how I want it and not have to consider a spouse or a roommate. You see what I'm saying? So it's just for me. However, if you have a more neutral palette, creams, white, beige, grays, I can do that too. We'll just play more with texture and shape. But trust and believe, I got you. I'm good at it and I know where to source these things. Stay tuned for next week where I actually will do an apartment tour and sourcing. So while I'm showing you my apartment, I'm also dropping gems on where you can find these things in Nairobi. Okay? So now that the updates are out the way, y'all know Auntie got her tea. Today, we have hibiscus flowers, fresh pineapple, cinnamon bark, allspice, nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, and honey. It's delicious. And you know, I always got my notes. If you see me glancing off to the side, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm looking at my notes so I can stay on target. This one is looking like it's going to be a long one. I don't want to rush, but it's necessary. The cost of caring for Asian parents in Africa. I am currently in Nairobi, Kenya. However, I will also touch on outside of Kenya. The reason why I wanted to do this episode, because this is my life. I recently did a cost of living in Nairobi episode, and I did not include the cost of caring for my mother, who is here with me in Nairobi. Quite a few people have reached out to me and asked me to do an episode about this. They are middle-aged and they are in this stage of life where they have become the parent to their parents. And at least in my social feeds, it's trending, or how, you know, these parents is not behaving and you got to get them in order. So let me tell you how this is going to go. First, we're going to talk about the economic costs. And of course, you know, Auntie got her stats ready. Then we're going to talk about the legal aspects of caring for your parent in Africa. Housing options, there are many, particularly in Kenya. Accessibility for someone who has mobility challenges. Medical hospitals will cover that. Cultural expectations specific for East Africa. Emotional costs, the spiritual aspects, and also business opportunities. So first off, let's just go with the economics. It's cheaper. It's cheaper to care for your parent in Africa than it is in the UK and US. And I mentioned the US and the UK specifically because my analytics tell me that most of the people viewing are in the US, UK, and also Kenya. So let's break it down. Let's look at nursing homes. I know my Africans are like, oh my God, it's so taboo to put your parent in a nursing home. I happen to be one of those horrible Americans that has my mama in an assisted living home. It did not start out that way, but that's where we are. Now, y'all know I went to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT pulled information from seniorliving.org, the Senior List, Story Point Senior Living, and World Population Review. Okay, so that is where, oh, there's one more. No, that's it. That's where these numbers are coming from. So in the United States, the monthly nursing home costs are going to be topping out at $10,500. In the UK, $6,000. In Kenya, $700. This is in USD. Then looking at medical care costs per month. In the US, topping out at $2,000. The UK, $1,500. And that's very subjective because in the UK, they have free healthcare. Now, I have heard that in the UK, the issue with the free healthcare is the queue. Sometimes it can take months to see a doctor. So y'all over there, y'all know what the system is like. I'm sure you'll know how to navigate it. In Kenya, it's topping out at $300 per month. So let's look at the total monthly, including nursing home care costs and medical care costs combined in each country. In the States, it's topping out at $12,500. In the UK, it's $7,500. In Kenya, it's topping out at $1,000 per month. Now, when you look at the big picture, how is this really going to impact you annually, particularly if your parents have not prepared for this moment in their lives? In the United States, $150,000 annually. In the UK, $90,000 annually. And in Kenya, $12,000 annually. Fortunately, I do have a parent, my dad. We've had this conversation. In me dealing with my mom's situation, I literally went into his art studio where he was relaxed and sitting down, and I said, Daddy, do you mind if we have an adult conversation? He said, sure. And that's how we broached this subject. And I mention it because a lot of people are just like, I don't even know how to talk to my parent about wills and estates and inheritance and property and medical and POAs. That's how I did it. How do you mind? Do you mind if we have an adult conversation? And that way they can stop looking at you like you're 15 years old, like you're 21 years old, and be reminded you are a grown-ass person. You are an adult, and y'all gonna have this conversation. My father let me know, you ain't got to worry about me. I'm set. I'm prepared. My mother, on the other hand, not at all. Okay? So let's keep moving on. Now, we have the option of having a 24-hour in-home aide. This is someone who is not a nurse. They're not licensed to be a nurse, but they can be in your home 24 hours or maybe just half the day. At one point, I had an aide in the house Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, just from the morning till about 5 or 6 o'clock. So I wanted to give you the cost of having a 24-hour aide in your home. All right, so in the United States, we're talking about $8,000 monthly. UK, $4,200. Kenya, $1,000, Now, when you add the medical costs to that, potential medical costs, it'll really depend on the medical needs of your parent. Your annual cost per country of having an aide in your house 24 hours, $120,000 annually, $64,800 in the UK. Sorry, y'all, do the math. And in Kenya, $22,800 annually to have an aide in your house 24 hours. Now, the 24-hour aide cost, that did not work for me because I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Even though this place is bigger than any apartment I grew up in, to me, it's still small. And I went with GoCare. I hopped into my apartment WhatsApp group chat and I asked, and my neighbors came through. And GoCare was a caregiving organization in Nairobi that I went with. And so they came to the house, they surveyed the house, they checked my mom out, and they were like, okay, we can offer you a nurse, we can offer you an aide, which would you prefer? At that point in time, I was like, we just need an aide. So then they said, well, she can sleep in the room with your mama. Culturally, as Americans, I was not comfortable with that. My mama was not comfortable with that. Because I was like, there's not enough room in there. When I do the apartment tour, you'll see. I said, there's not enough room in there. They said, oh, no, she'll sleep on the floor. Again, as American, that was alarming. And I said, oh, I'm uncomfortable with that. They said, it's her job. It's her job. So I have even been advised by my neighbors to have an aide sleep outside. Not outside, but outside. So adjacent to my flat is an area where we do, where my housekeeper does washing. It's a storage area, and it's perforated bricks. It's a breeze coming through there, and Nairobi can get cold, particularly at night. So my neighbors are just like, oh, you can just put up some cardboard, cover those holes, and she can sleep out there. culturally, that does not sit right with me. So what I went with was, like I said, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She came in from 8 to 5 and looked after my mom. Okay. Now, let's say your parent has major health issues and you need 24-hour nurse care. Let's look at it per country. When you combine the medical care costs as well as estimated by ChatGPT, in the US, 24-hour nurse care will be $216,000. That's in home. In the UK, $116,400. In Kenya, it's $38,400. I know that in the US, and I'm sure in the UK, that there's all these programs that are available for people who are in this situation. I am not aware of them. I did not research them, but I know that this will vary by state. I do have a very close girlfriend who, at a pretty early age, took on the responsibility of caring for her dad. And she was trying to advise me. She was like, I don't know what's going on in Kenya, but in California, there's this program and there's that program that will help with the medical expenses and this and that. And I was just like, I don't really know if that exists here. So please research that, because $216,000 annually, that's a lot. I know most Americans are not even making that annually. All right, so these last statistics are from A Place for Mom, the Senior List, the Key, UK Care Guide, and Clara Home Care. Now, these numbers do not include all the other things that you will do for your parents. Okay, what I did not include in my cost of living was my outings, where when I take my mom out, I want her to see Kenya. I want her to get out of the house. My mama used to be a street runner. Okay, I will go into that later on. She used to be a street runner. I know sitting up in that house has got to be mind-numbing for her. So I take her out. We go to eat. We go sightseeing. Sometimes we'll just go over to, is it the Hub? The Hub in Karen, where they have like bungee jumping and what's that other thing where people glide across the line? They have all these activities, and it's just interesting for her. We'll go out to eat. I don't include that cost as well. My mother is on that sad American diet. She likes hamburgers and hot dogs and pizza, milkshakes, fried chicken. Yeah, that's it. And there was a time when I was actually buying groceries for her and sending it over to the house and letting the chef make food specifically for her. My mother is in an assisted living facility in Karen, and she's the only American. Everybody else is Kenyan. There is one Ugandan woman who grew up in Kenya. And these people, they speak English, which lets you know their level of education, particularly as Kenyan baby boomers. However, as their cognitive abilities progress or decline, if you will, they revert back to their mother tongue, whether it's Luo or Luya or Kikuyu. And sometimes I just have to remind them, like, I don't understand you. Please speak English. Whereas when I first started going there, they would all speak to me in English because they knew, whose daughter I was. There is a chef there. The chef, there's been a turnover of chefs. However, when I request, they will make a special meal for my mother. So if she wants waffles or pancakes or pizza or what have you, they'll make it for her. However, what I will say is my mother has dementia. My mother also had some health issues with hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes. She didn't have them full on, but when she came to me, she was on the cusp. So she had medication. Since she has been on that Kenyan diet, that ugali with the beef stew and the chicken stew and the greens and the carrots and the cabbage and the beans, all that has gone away. Okay, she is good to go. I also don't include the clothing. My mother came to me very short notice. We had been estranged. I will get into that later. And her childhood friend, the only one she had left, packed up my mama's things with a quickness and sent her my way. My mother used to be a model. She's taller than me, or was taller than me, and she worked in Hollywood. She loved to dress. Where are those clothes? They were not packed. She was sent with random jogging pants and t-shirts that did not match. And then she's lost a significant amount of weight, which meant that I needed to go out and buy her new lounge sets. And I'm happy to be able to do it. And for me to do something like that in Kenya, you know, each piece was costing me between 700 and let's say 1,000 shillings max. So that's less than $8 for a whole lounge set. And this is also not including her beauty treatments. I am a slightly vain woman. My mother is very vain, and her appearance is very important to her. So I keep her hair and her nails done, hands and feet, on a regular basis. I am fortunate in that there is a salon near where she lives, and they make house calls. Now, we're still on the economics. This is so important. Please make sure that your parents have their finances in order. If you are bringing your parent to Africa, or if they're traveling with you, this means that you need to establish a POA, a power of attorney. There's a medical one and there's a financial one. You need both. And every institution that has their money and or benefits needs to be in possession of this POA. Notarized POA. The issue that I ran into is that I had a notarized POA, medical and financial. However, they wanted me to fly back to the US to present it in hand. I could not email it. I could not fax it. They were not interested in scheduling a video call in this day and age. The way I was accessing all my resources to try to get around this. American financial institutions are really antiquated in how they do things. So there was a point where my mother was unable to verify that she was the owner of her accounts because of the dementia. And so, as you know, in the States, they'll ask you things like, you know, where have you lived in the last 10 years? She could not remember. What revolving accounts do you have open? She could not remember. So I'm like this, you know what? Let me go to the branch in South Africa. Let me go to the branch in Europe. You have to come into a US branch. So I knew that there was a branch in Kenya. It was a commercial branch, but I was like, if I can get in front of somebody, I can convince them. The way I was on a wild goose chase just to find this branch in Kenya. Oh, it moved. Oh, it closed. I spent half the day driving around on my little scooter trying to find this branch. Ultimately, I had to fly back to the US with my documents in hand, present myself, answer a few questions, and within 2 to 3 days, yes, ma'am, you are now put on this account. I do not want you to have to go through that, because the thousands of dollars that I spent just to make that happen. Okay, so we ventured over into the legal. The last thing that I will say about the legal aspect of caring for your parents in Africa. They accounts is in North America or in Europe, but you and your parent are here. Listen, they need to give you authorization while they still have the cognitive ability to do so. Because the problem that I ran into is that the branch manager, I managed to move all the way up to the branch manager. He was like, I am really sorry. What I can do is bring this to all of the branch managers. We meet once a month, and I can ask them how to proceed, and then I'll get back to you. He did, and the answer was still no. The issue with one of the financial institutions, they was just like, your mother cannot grant you authorization because she doesn't have the cognitive ability to do so at this point in her life. So that leaves you to file in all types of paperwork, and it just gets real muddled. You don't want to be in that situation. So as hard as these conversations can be with our parents, the people that brought us into this world, you've got to have them, and you've got to have them while they still have the cognitive ability. Because if you have to walk into each financial institution with your parents, do so. And be very diligent about it. Sometimes our parents have insurance policies and accounts that they forgot about, that they never told you about, and that requires you digging through the paperwork. Moving on from legal, let's talk about the housing options. I think that in Africa, there's so many more housing options for middle class. If you're an upper class person, you got it like that, or maybe you have a lot of family land, that's amazing. But for a lot of us, we live in apartments. I actually grew up in apartments, and so we do got some family land down in Kentucky. No one in my immediate family has ever lived in Kentucky. The only person in my family that has ever lived in Kentucky that I'm aware of is my paternal grandmother, and she left when she was in her teens. So, what are your housing options when you're living in a city? It can be really tough. Now, I'm going to share with you what I have seen my peers do, Black expats do in Kenya specifically. One that I thought was really cool. This guy brought his mother here to Kenya, and they have like side by side townhomes. That's the best way to describe it. It's all on one compound. It's a very modern compound. My place was built in the 70s. So if you're worried about moving to Kenya, you think like, oh my God, the houses look so old. This is my style. I like old things. One of the homes I owned in the US was constructed in the late 1800s. So that's my steed. But if you like something modern, it exists here. There's tons of apartment tours on YouTube that you can look through for that. But they had this modern townhome situation where literally they were just separated by a few feet, a little walkway, and this woman was in her 80s, and her grandbabies was right next door, her child right next door. That was an amazing setup. They had a beautiful lawn, they had security, and that's an option for you. Multi-generational home, I've seen that as well. There's another sister here who has her mom with her, and they have a big house, and mom lives in the house with them. The other option that I've seen is a multi-generational compound, and that is something that we don't really know a whole lot about in the US. However, maybe more so like Caribbean American families, Latin and Asian American families, they're more familiar with that. But it's really common in East Africa where you have a compound and everybody has their own living space. That's a great option. And then you also will have space for the live-in nurse, the live-in aide. I want to apologize for the noise. I tried doing this like 3 hours ago. And it looks like there's going to be a wedding next door, and they're constructing the tents and the canopies and all of that. So I apologize for the banging. I'll try to edit some of this out. So let's talk about assisted living facilities in Africa. Culturally, it's so taboo to put your parent in an assisted living facility or a nursing home. I find that there's quite a bit of shaming in Africa about that. And, it probably just shows up on my timeline because Google knows what I'm doing. My phone knows my life. But what's interesting to me is how the culture is shifting. One of my Luo friends said to me, he was like, there'll be a time when we will no longer go up country for the holidays. And I was like, why? He was like, because grandma will be from Nairobi. Just think about it. Holidays, weekends, Africans will go to their villages. And, it makes sense. It's part of a tradition. If you don't go, everybody's calling you like, where are you? You know what I'm saying? But now as people become more urbanized, folks don't want to go to the village. And soon enough, grandma will be from Nairobi. So another thing that is happening is, at least where my mom is, I don't know everybody's story, but I suspect that some of those residents have family that live abroad. And rather than bringing that parent, that sister, that great uncle or great auntie to North America or Europe, they have them in this assisted living facility. And so people's standards, as I was touring different nursing homes, I was speaking to a Kikuyu woman who had opened up a nursing home after being a nurse in North America for a number of years. And she said that Africans' standards are changing. There was a point in time where it was fine for you to retire, go to the village, look after the chickens and goats, and then you would have like a distant cousin looking after your parent. And because people's standards are changing, that's not good enough. They want someone to look after their parent that has a specialization in dementia care, in Alzheimer, in nursing, etc. So it will be interesting to see what transpires in Africa as people become more urbanized. And for those of you who like to shame, wait till it's your turn. Wait till it's your turn. And you have children, you have a spouse, you have a career, and now your parent needs help toileting, eating, bathing, if you can get them to bathe, dressing, and walking. I can tell you for a fact, 2 people are required to help change my mama, or I should say, yes, change her, because she's at that stage of life where she is wearing diapers. 2 people is required to get her dressed. And if you have your parent living with you and you decided, I want to do this all on my own, blessings to you. Fortunately, one of my girlfriends had been through it with her grandmother. And she told me from jump, shout out to my girl Rita. She told me from jump, she said, I went back to the States to check on my family. My mama and my sister were spent. I hope I'm not giving too much information, but she was just like, I had to do something about it because the toll on you as a caretaker is a lot. And when you're a younger person, like, who thinks about that? But now that folks is living longer and we're getting older, these are things that you need to think about. And trying to do this in your flats, in Nairobi, in Kampala, in Accra, in Joburg, it might prove challenging. One of the things that I will say about assisted living facilities, a lot of these places don't take, I won't say a lot, some of these places do not take residents that have dementia or Alzheimer's. That's something to consider. And even for me being in Nairobi, which is a very metropolitan city, just finding the right place for my mom was a challenge. I reached out to one of the seniors in our Black expat community and asked her, and she got back to me with an amazing option that was not listed on the internet. And I visited and I was like, okay, this is good. Also, just thinking about the person running the place. One of the places I visited, the woman was straight up. She was like, I'm in this to make money. I'm not trying to offer these services to the poor. All right. The other thing that I had to consider as well, my mother had lived all of her life as a Black woman in the United States of America, marginalized, dealing with micro and macro aggressions. She came up in Jim Crow, the American apartheid. So I wasn't trying to place her anywhere where that could happen to her again. There are some facilities that have predominantly white residents, as they call them here, Kenyan cowboys. So I had to be careful about that as well. There was one place I visited, I would not leave my dog, and I'm telling you straight up. And that guy was charging as much as the place where my mama is staying. And he was offering much less. And he was talking about, don't call me, telling me you need towels, blankets, sheets, toilet paper, soap, none of that for your mother. You provide that for your mother. And I'm like, do the children of the residents here know what is happening? Or did they just make a call and have their parent placed there? The other thing I will say is that always go to your parents' room. Don't just go to the visiting common areas. Go to the room. Every time I go to visit my mother, I'm in the room. I'm checking out the bathroom. She has a private room. Well, now one of the nurses sleeps in the room with her. I'm organizing her closet. I'm making sure everything is copacetic. There was a situation where the washing machine was ripping up the residents' clothes. Ain't nobody paying their money to have their parents' clothes ripped up like that. Especially me, like I'm trying to keep my mama laced because I know how she is. So that type of thing, me having things delivered and then they're not being put to use or they're not being put in the right place. This is something that you need to do as well. And when I go, I stay for basically a half a day or a whole day. I don't just drop in and out. That's going to depend on your schedule. But because I spend so much time there, I get to know the residents. I make nice with the staff. Sometimes I bring like gifts. There'll be like, I'll cater, samosas, mandazi, or whatever it is, just to show my staff appreciation. The other options that you have in Kenya specifically is a daycare. There's a couple of places in Nairobi that have daycares, just so you can get a break. Folks say it's like caring for a child. It's not. I will get into that. But you may find that you need a break because your parent might be at the point where you have to do everything for them. So you can have your driver pick them up, take them to daycare. At one point, I had my mama going to a ceramic class once a week until she was just like, I can take it or leave it. She basically just wanted to sit in front of the TV. Now, going back to the continent as a whole, I'm very fortunate in Nairobi that these services are offered. My homegirl from Uganda was here, and she always asked about my mom, and she was just like, you're so fortunate that this exists here, because it does not exist in Uganda. It's still so taboo to place your parent there. They're very much more into like a multi-generational setup. But now you have situations where I'm even looking at my housekeeper who she's here working, and her mother lives near the Busia border. That's the border between Kenya and Uganda. So, we're going to see how things evolve in Africa. And what I'll do is I will place references so that you can click them and you can visit the sites and you can actually talk to people and find out like how much they charge for these things. Let's talk about accessibility really quickly in terms of someone who is in a wheelchair or has a walker. Very limited in Africa. I'll just be honest with you. In the U.S., we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which basically mandates that public spaces, transportation, bathrooms, etc., they have to be wheelchair accessible. In the UK, it's the Equality Act of 2010. That may actually exist in other parts of Africa, however, not enforced. So you'll find that maybe in Nairobi, there are a few pockets that are wheelchair friendly, or in Joburg or Cape Town, or some of the more developed cities. But as a whole, it's a challenge. And so when I'm taking my mom on these outings, I really have to think like, will she be able to access the space in her wheelchair? The other thing that I will say is that if you have a parent that has one of them scooters, go ahead and buy it abroad and import it here. You can use a company called Kintex. You can use their C service to bring that over here, because if you try to buy it here, they do exist. They're going to be very costly. And in the US, you could probably use some sort of benefit to at least subsidize the cost of that scooter. Let's talk about medication. In Africa, the medication is going to be much cheaper. Last I heard, the United States paid more for pharmaceuticals than any other country in the world. The issue with medication in Africa is you probably won't be able to get your parents' brand of medication. Maybe you can get another version, another brand, a generic. But even me, just with my HRT, hormone replacement therapy, is not available here. So you're going to need to set that up. If your parent has, Medicare or Medicaid, you're going to need to set that up to where they can still receive those benefits and have that medication shipped here. You can use something like DHL. Very reliable. I would recommend DHL. Look into my eyes. When you're shipping something small, I recommend DHL. Just trust me on that. Okay? Now, when we're talking about health insurance, it can top out at $1,000 or more. Medicare Part B premiums typically cost $174 a month. Private insurance can go from $500 to $800 per month, and it'll increase as your parents get older. Something to consider. In the UK, where y'all have free health care, this is going to be very subjective. It'll depend on whether you're going to go the private or the public route. Private insurance will be between 100 to 300 pounds per month, and it'll increase with age. Now, looking at private health insurance in Kenya, $100 to $200 per month. It can even go up to $300 per month. Now, one brother I know that has his mother here was telling me about the health insurance that she chose, and it was several $100s per month. However, he said that is what made his mother feel comfortable, because included in her insurance package, should anything happen to her medically, she had the option to be airlifted out of the country. There's that. Now, I want to touch on the cultural piece. I've already mentioned that it's very taboo to have your parent placed in a home. Off top, you should know that there is, generally speaking, so much reverence and respect given for older people. When I'm at the coast, of Kenya, when I'm in Tanzania, people say shikamo, which is a greeting reserved for older people. And then my response is marahaba. So the cultural expectation is that mom and dad will retire in the village. One of the things that we lost during the transatlantic slave trade is that we ain't got no village. And I'm getting a little excited here because there's so much shame. It's just like, and this is what I'd like to add as well. My African friends who are middle age is having a hard time getting their parents to just retire, just sit down. Just it's a wrap. But you have to think like these people, they have been running companies, managing people, operating at a high level. Now you want them to go off to greener pastures in the village and look after some chickens and goats. They not having it. So it will be interesting to see how Gen X and millennials and African Gen Zs navigate this point in their lives. And so what I've also seen in Tanzania and in Kenya is that your elders are like shut in. They don't go outside, they don't get sunlight, they stay with inside, and they are bathed, they are fed, they are changed, they converse with the family, all of this, but like inside the house. So when I bring my mama out, people really be looking at me like I'm abusing my mother. They don't know if I'm her mother. They don't know I'm sorry, they don't know if I'm her daughter, if I'm her caregiver. I'm both. Then I'm out there with a little cutoff shirt on, wheeling her around. Like, it's just like, people, if I take her to KFC, because she loves fried chicken and fast food, I'm in KFC and people are just like, with their mouths open, because the cultural expectations that she will be in the house. She should be in the house. If she's not in the village, she should be in the house. That's not my cultural expectation. And as I said, my mama was a street runner. She tired, and she told me she misses her autonomy. When I see her, I'm like, Mom, what's up? What's going on? Nothing. Okay. All right, so this is getting a little long. I want to wrap this up pretty quickly, but I can't talk about caring for your parent, the cost of caring for your parent, without talking about the emotional cost. And it's tough. It's tough to watch your parent decline. And sometimes it's rapidly. You have this old vision of them as being your superhero, larger than life, and then there's this other phase where maybe they don't even remember you and they need help with every aspect. And there are times when I definitely just want to break down and cry because it's so hard to watch. I think I'm at a point now where I've accepted it. It is what it is. There's another layer for those of us who endured abuse and neglect at the hands of our parents. And, without going into too much detail, my story with my mom is one of neglect and manipulation and kidnapping and custody battles and identity and credit card theft, money theft, sabotage and jealousy, and undiagnosed mental health issues. And there was a point in time where I did seek to get family therapy for us and was advised against it by a professional. So, and just in case you're considering family therapy for a family member who may have cluster personality disorders, I was advised by a friend of mine that taught family therapy at U of Maryland. She was just like, they'll come to the therapy if they can get something out of it. They'll perform to gain access to the grandkids, to gain access to money, to gain access to you, but there will be no real change. And I mention this because I want to talk about the taboo. Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, we're going to talk about the taboo so that people don't have to suffer in silence. And the reigning thought is that honor thy mother and thy father. Sometimes some people's mothers and fathers have done the unspeakable to their children. And so when you add that layer on top of caring for them, you who may be very, very triggered, especially when you invite your parent into your home and they start exhibiting some of those very, very toxic characteristics that can harm you, harm your children, and really disintegrate your marriage. I did find some resources online. One is Dementia Care Blazers. I will link her information. If you have a parent that's going through that, like I learned so much just by watching her videos, and she's been on YouTube for years, so there's tons of content for you to pour through. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot. I almost forgot this book, and it's sitting in front of me the whole time. This book is called The Body Keeps a Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk, MD. I recommend this book for anybody who has experienced childhood trauma, adult trauma, is loving on somebody that has experienced trauma, because it explains a lot. And it took me a long time to get through this book, but what I got from this book was a lot. The main thing that I got from this book is that I have downplayed the neglect that I've experienced at the hands of my mother my whole life. One of the ways that I would self-soothe is by telling myself, well, at least I'm not getting my ass beat. At least I'm not getting my ass beat. Because we grew up with people, maybe you were that person that experienced that. This book lays out how physical and mental, or physical and emotional abuse, are on par with each other, and they have the same physiological and psychological effects on the body. So I highly recommend it. Another piece about caring for a parent is a lot of people will compare it to caring for a child, and it's not the same thing. Generally speaking, when your child is a baby, there's an expectation they will grow and then that they will be able to be self-sufficient. It's the opposite when you're caring for a parent. The expectation is that they will continue to decline. And it can take a toll on you emotionally as well as your parent, because they're frustrated that things are not working as they used to. The other thing that is important to remember that I'm discovering that my meditation teacher shared with me, and this is really for those people who find yourself caring for an abusive or neglectful parent, and that is, this is your karma. I was really just trying to figure out how I was going to navigate the situation, and I was speaking to my meditation teacher, and he was like, Tadre, I am a black gay man in Africa. You don't think I have issues with my mother? Of course I have issues with my mother. He said, this is your karma. You either deal with it now or you deal with it later. And I was just like, my karma, what did I do to deserve this? However, subsequently, having gone through psilocybin plant ceremonies, I see it. I see the karma. Me and my mama go way, way back. And without going too deep, a lot of these relationships, parent-child relationships, these romantic relationships where you're just drawn to a person and it's just really intense, those are generally karmic relationships. And I remember one of my spiritual guides, Michael Beckwith, from The Secret, and also pastor or spiritual leader of the Agape Spiritual Center, now in Beverly Hills. I remember him saying one day that we choose our parents. You chose your parents. And I'm sitting in the congregation like, he not talking to me. He couldn't possibly be talking to me, because why would I choose that? He was right. There are people that say, oh, you wouldn't be here without your parents. You would be here. Your assignment would just be different. You would have come through a different set of parents, and you would have had a different assignment. However, this is my assignment, and I'm glad I took it on. In all of the pain and the triggering that happened and the uncomfortability that happened, I'm glad I took it on, because I feel at peace knowing that I can check on my mama, know that I can do right by my mama, knowing that our karmic agreement is complete. And lastly, what I'll offer you is that this is a business opportunity. I do have a friend here who is American, and she's considering going into this business of elder care. She said to me, she was like, Tadre, there's lots of women like us who are child-free and unmarried, and what's going to happen to us? You know what I'm saying? I've even had this conversation with my dad. He's just like, your best bet is to just stay healthy as long as possible. And that's what he's banking on as well. Fortunately, he has me. But there aren't many places here. And as Nairobi, as Africa, generally speaking, continues to become more and more urbanized, there will arise the need for more elder care. I feel very good about where my mom is at, because the women who own it, they're doctors, and this is a passion project for them. They went through a similar thing, or currently are going through a similar situation. And one of them said she didn't like the way her dad was being treated. And so she launched this place, and she's very hands-on, and I just feel really good about it. So this is the free version. I hope that you got a lot out of it. If you want to deep dive even more, hit me up for a consultation. Please be very intentional about your goals. Thank you for joining me on this episode of BLAXIT to Africa. If you like what you heard, please share, subscribe, and leave a comment. May you thrive, may you be inspired, may you move with love and intention. Until next time.